All right, awesome, awesome. We have a very accomplished guest with us this week on the Supercharged podcast powered by Engine. I'm, of course, Kamaar DJ Arnett, your host, COO with Engine Systems, and we've got George Fisher, Chief Executive Officer of Chief Digital Marketers as well. And Joe is our special guest, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Claremont Lincoln University, also the founder and co-host of Ed Up Experience, 2019 AMA Higher Ed Team of the Year award winner, and also just received his doctorate in 2019. Joe, seems like 2019 was an extraordinary year. I know you didn't expect to run into everything we ran into in early 2020, but if you could, maybe tell us a little bit about, just some of the accomplishments and things that you've done that kind of brought you to 2019, 2020, and definitely tell us about the AMA Higher Ed Team of the Year award.
Well, first, thank you for having me, guys, and I hope you're well and your families are all well. It's a strange time. There's no doubt about that right now. But no, I thank you for the intro. And 2019 was a pretty good year, and I think from a personal standpoint, getting a doctorate was a highlight for me. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't walk around in my regalia every once in a while in the kitchen. Because right now I don't know if I'm going to have a graduation, so I've got to at least show the kids what you get when you finish school. So that's an important thing. Look, 2019 was great. My institution, Claremont Lincoln University, we're a nonprofit startup university, and we've grown our population by about 500% over the last 18 months or so. Half of 2018 through 2019. Lead flow going up by over 600%, we were really lucky enough to win the AMA Higher Education Team of the Year award in 2019, beating out Stony Brook University of the SUNY system in New York and the University of Notre Dame, which I relish a little bit, beating out really two well-known schools. With really the little guy, but you can do a lot with a little if you know what you're doing, and so. It was really a good year. Certainly, to your point, didn't expect to end it the way that we did, with really running into this brick wall called COVID-19. And for the last 6 months or so, we've all been dealing with it in various ways. I started out with a couple of boxes and 2 laptops, and now I at least have 2 monitors and a docking station. So we're all adjusting. I might have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old burst in here at any moment, so I'm going to apologize in advance. But yeah, man, it's been great, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
No worries at all about the 5-year-old busted in. That's the new normal.
Yeah, it is.
We might have one bust in or burst in as well. Okay, so tell us, I guess, a little bit about how gathering students, recruiting students has changed since the pandemic.
Look, Kamaar, I think there's been and always will be a big difference between active recruitment and passive recruitment. And I think institutions vary, certainly, right? There's for-profit institutions, you've got small non-profit private institutions, you've got the large public institutions, and the well-known Ivy League, call them elite or boutique institutions, if you will. There's this sense, and I have a lot of higher ed leaders on my podcast as well, the Ed Up Experience. So I've got a lot of information, a lot of insight, like you guys do as well. One of the things that everybody keeps saying is, we're in this together, and I think we are. I think we are in this together. We're in this at K-12. We're in this at higher education. And there's an and but. And the and but is eventually there is going to be a aggressive race for students. And that race right now isn't being talked about as much, because I think everybody's still adjusting to moving to remote learning, which is not online learning. Remote learning is not pure pedagogical online learning. It's completely different. It's taking of this product and moving it from here to there and not designing something for online. So there's a big difference, and I could talk more about that later. But you have this sense that we're all in this together, and that's great. But when the dust settles and institutions realize that their recruitment may be down by up to 20, 30%, then what? What are they going to do? Particularly those institutions that have never really had to recruit actively to retain or to get students to enroll them. Not only are you talking about top tier institutions with wait lists that may no longer have wait lists, you're talking about, and I think the biggest, sort of a shrinking of the middle is you're looking at institutions from 1,000 to 10,000 students operating with maybe 1 to 2 years of operating expense in the bank or endowment in the bank that now are going to be literally pulling the reserves out to be able to operate. The only way you survive in the future is to recruit students. And if you've never really competed in an online space, because I'll tell you guys right now, there's absolutely no way that things go back to normal completely. Every single school, I don't care who you are, is going to have online learning to some degree, either overtly because they're going to have to slim out their fixed expense, and they're going to look at online learning as a higher margin business, right, to survive. Or you're going to be looking at institutions that have it at least as a risk mitigation platform. Whether they have, they have to cancel classes because of this, cancel classes because of that. They don't have to do that anymore, right? They can continue to operate online. So what's going to happen though when 10 schools that used to compete for the one student is now 100 schools online competing for that same student? You have schools that are small that have never had a marketing budget, right? You look at for-profit institutions of the past, and even currently, that are spending 20% of their gross revenue on marketing. Maybe you're an institution, brand name institution, you spend 1% or 2% on marketing. How do you compete for keyword bidding? How do you compete for brand optimization when you don't have any money or you haven't allocated that money? You talked about the AMA, and I'm rambling a little bit, but you talked about the AMA conference. One of the biggest takeaways from there, they had a speaker that raised their hand and said to all of these marketers in the room, how many of your college presidents value marketing, understand marketing? And when I tell you that there were barely any hands that went up, there were barely any hands that went up. So, you have to look at that and say, what does that mean for institutions now? And the answer is, I don't know. So active recruitment is going to be where it's at because there's going to be a whole lot of schools recruiting the same student more than ever.
So Joe, that's a great point. Google, Facebook, all these online advertising channels are a bidding war, right? And so if you have a huge influx of competitors into the market, that's going to drive the costs up. I mean, we've seen from all the media we manage, during COVID-19, the costs have come down, 20, 30% in certain industries, right? Because people are just pulling their budgets, pausing, trying to figure out what they're going to do, what their game plan is. But, knowing that the costs are going to increase because there's going to be a lot of competitors coming into this online market, what are 1 or 2 or 3 things that you guys are doing or you would recommend an existing player do to kind of firm up their fortress, so to speak, to be prepared as new competitors enter in?
Well, I think there's it's going back to blocking and tackling, right? And I think whenever you're looking at, rapid change like this, you have to go back to your original infrastructure and say, do you have the goods to compete? So you look at your organic, your site, is your site optimized? Let me restate that. There's a big difference between brand marketing and response marketing, or if you want to call it cultivation and capture, right? And I think that schools are going to have to move more towards capture, right? If they're getting an interested person to their website, there's a big difference between the apply now button and the request information button, right? If you're requesting information, I've got your information. I can work you actively. If it's an apply now button and I click on that button, there's 30 fields for me to fill out. I'm not so sure I'm going to do that. It's funny because I was talking with an institution recently and I checked out their website and they had their full-on application, right? So when I say full-on application, I'm talking about those 30 to 40 fields, social security number, da, 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 da. And the question is the student really at that point, when they first hit your site and they're researching, going to be filling out a 40-page application? To me, the answer is absolutely not. They're going to, you need to have short forms built to capture that information. You can call it application if you want, but then there's an extended application later when they're actually going to enroll. So there's that big difference between cultivation and capture. A lot of schools are cultivating. They're sort of building up, particularly if they're at undergrad. They're looking at these pipelines and cultivating, but now it's a capture business. And I hate to say it so businessy, if you will, because higher ed is generally adverse to those business terms like student consumer and competition. But truly, that's what it is. The second thing I would say is split testing, right? For me, the big secret of marketing is split testing. This is just my own personal opinion. How many schools, and you look at the range of schools that exist, how many marketers are sitting in their office right now going, I'm going to send 2 emails out to my lead group that I have in my database, and I'm going to do one like this, and I'm going to do the exact same one, but I'm going to change the subject line, or I'm going to change the picture. I'm going to do one with a video, one without a video, and check my click-through rate. Now I'm going to take that split testing methodology, I'm going to apply it to my homepage. Maybe I've got 2 separate homepages, and I'm going to send half my brand new visitors to one, half my brand new visitors to another, and see what converts better. With a little incremental, I think it's a world of incremental increase. There is not going to be a blue pill that we can all take that's going to net us more students. It's going to be small incremental improvements on the marketing side. I also tell you guys, look, there's agencies out there. There are people out there that know exactly what they're doing. And there is a huge, huge, huge need, particularly in the nonprofit side, nonprofit institutions that don't understand fully competitive marketing in higher education that are a resource. And so, have contact, have George and Kamaar at your, in your speed dial, because you're going to need advice. And that goes for any of us. It goes for me. I've got a network of professionals that I call on that advise me and say, Joe, you're being absolutely nuts with this initiative. And I've got others that, sort of round that out. But I think that those are really the keys. It's you've got to look at your current resources. Say, do you have, are you competitive at even at the very least to be able to capture student interest? And do you have capacity internally to work? Because students this is not a you build it and they will come environment anymore. And this, guys, this COVID-19 deal is aside from the whole enrollment crash that they're predicting in 2025, 2026 with a 15% overall reduction in the number of college-age students. This is on top of that. So now between now and then, it's like we've doubled the problem. And yes, we're all working together and we're all going to help each other. But when you're an institution that might be facing a 20% enrollment decline, what are you going to do? And the answer is you better block and tackle, and you better have the contacts out there to help you.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great point. I mean, a lot of clients we work with, prospects we talk to, are analyzing their site. I mean, it's shocking. Big companies, for-profit, nonprofit, their top line revenues in hundreds of millions, and they don't have basic infrastructure like a sticky header or a sticky footer with a call to action. Yeah. Or you look at their lead form and they don't have a value prop at the top. They just hit you with the fields, right? And forget knowing what split testing is, right? And I think it's critical, like you said, the people that are going to win, especially in online advertising, are going to be the ones that convert the traffic at the highest point into a lead, and then eventually through your call center or other means close it into a enrolled student. But that first, what do I do with my clicks in terms of the conversion rate into a lead? If I'm able to do that 2 or 3x the rate you can do it at, I have endless more money that I can pile in than you have, right? Because I'm getting it on the back end. And you'd be shocked with the split test that we've seen where, changing the color of a button can increase 10% your lead form, which is just huge on a grander scale, especially as more competitors enter the market.
Yeah. And, it's funny because to that point, when I hear you talk, and I have a lot of colleagues in different colleges and universities, that language you just used, there's a lack of understanding of that language in general. Cost per, what's your true north metric? A cost per enrollment, a cost per lead, cost per enrollment, cost per start, acquisition cost. Okay, wait, what is that? How do I calculate that? I mean, we're talking about sometimes the basics And that's another part of active versus passive. If I'm passively recruiting, I'm